All right, today we're going to dig into something called USDT seeding. It's a model described in our source material for getting your hands on crypto assets in a completely different way. Let's jump right in.
So let's just start with this question. Imagine, for a second, what if instead of just going out and buying crypto, you could actually grow it? Cultivate your holdings from a much smaller starting point. That's really the core idea we're going to unpack today.
The source material really frames this as a whole new profit strategy for traders. So what is it really?
Okay, so here's the official definition. At its heart, USDT seeding is this process where, instead of buying your standard USDT, you invest in what's called a seed variant. And the whole goal, the whole point, is to use that seed to end up with a much larger amount of the mainstream USDT. So that's the big idea. But how is it all supposed to work in practice? Let's break down the actual step-by-step mechanism. According to our source, it's basically a three-step process. First up, you invest in a specific seed variant. The example given is something called W2W USDT. Step 2, you buy each unit of this seed for exactly $1. And then step 3, and this is the crucial part, each one of those seeds you bought is supposed to yield a greater amount of standard USDT. And here it is. This is the number that makes the whole thing tick. For every $1 seed unit, the source claims you'll get a yield of between 1.5 to 1.9 units of standard USDT. That promise that the output is way bigger than the input, that's the entire foundation of this strategy. Now, to make this idea a little less abstract and a little more down to earth, the source uses a really simple analogy from farming. The comparison is pretty straightforward, right? USD seeding is kind of like investing in mango seeds instead of just going to the store and buying mangoes. The whole idea is that you're acquiring the source of the product, not just the final product itself. And this slide really lays out the analogy perfectly. You see on the left, the W2W USDT is the crypto seed. The whole purpose is for it to become mainstream USDT, which is the fruit. It's the exact same logic you see on the right with a mango seed growing into a ripe mango. Okay, so getting that analogy is super important because it's the key to understanding how this model supposedly generates a profit. Let's actually look at how the numbers are supposed to play out. This table from the source really drives home the claim difference. Look, if you just buy and resell a kilo of mangoes, maybe you make 1 or 2 rupees in profit. But if you invest in the seeds to grow 5 kilos of mangoes, you could be looking at a profit of at least 30 rupees per kilo. I mean, that's a dramatically different return. So it doesn't matter if we're talking about mangoes or crypto, right? The fundamental idea being presented here is exactly the same. You use an initial seed purchase to get a much larger volume of the final valuable thing than you ever could have by just buying it directly. So let's bring this all back to crypto with a really clear visual. A direct $100 purchase of USDT gets you, well, $100 of USDT. Simple enough? But according to this model, that same $100 investment in the seed variant, if it hits that average 1.7x yield, would turn into $170 worth of mainstream USDT. And that gap, that $70 difference, is the entire basis for this strategy. All right, so after breaking all that down, what's the big investment takeaway from this whole concept? To wrap it all up, USDT seeding is being presented as this model for getting USDT at a lower effective cost. The whole thing hinges on buying a special seed variant to hopefully generate a much larger volume of the final asset. And the stated goal here is to help traders seriously amplify their profits from online trading. And that pretty much brings us to the end of our explainer. We've laid out the concept of USDT seeding just as it's described in the source. But this leaves us with one final, and I think very important question to think about. Anytime an investment strategy promises yields that are this much higher than the regular market, what's the absolute first question you should be asking yourself? We'll leave you to think on that one.